demonstration, I'm going to essentially go through a step-by-step guide in terms of how I'll go from an image out the camera to a fully processed, fully edited image, which I am happy with and which I feel looks professional for a architectural photograph. So first of all, I'm going to go through a process called image stitching, which is something which I began at the beginning of this module, and I've really grown to enjoy and really love actually. So effectively, image stitching is where you take multiple images of the same scene, and you use a tripod, and then it creates, so it's basically you're getting different perspectives of the same scene, and then the idea is to then stitch this together digitally, and it creates a wide, expansive view of the scene. So it's a big advantage in terms of architectural photography, because you want to try and limit the wideness of the lens you use. So for me, personally, I would only really ever want to use anywhere between 28mm to 50. I don't really want to go anywhere outside that range. So for me, image stitching allows me to create an image which is wide and expansive, but but means I don't have to use a really wide angle, and then it means that my perspective is more appropriate, I feel. So anyway, first of all, in this particular image, which I shot in a library space, I've created 8 images effectively, and the reason there's 24 on display is because I've applied a process called image bracketing, which is effectively whereby 3 exposures of the same image are made. You can do this manually. However, I've opted to set it to auto image bracketing. So specifically the idea is that it will record 3 different exposures of the same scene, and through this I'm going to merge all 3 together, and it's going to give an image with higher tonal contrast. So I'm just going to go through and turn all of these 24 images into 8 bracketed images, which would be known as HDR, high dynamic range. So it's quite a simple process. So I'd work in Lightroom for this initial step, and I want to take all 8 images. Oh, sorry. And then I want to go to Photo Merge and select HDR, and it shouldn't take too long, hopefully. So as you can see, this is the HDR preview, and there's a lot more punch and a lot more contrast in this resulting image. So there's a setting here. You've got 3 settings, in fact. You've got auto align, which is not really, I would say, necessary, because I've been using a tripod, and therefore my images are exact each time, and therefore there's absolutely no need for auto align. You've also got, don't see the difference. No. So you've also got auto settings, which are obviously very important. So that's your that's effectively the automatic process of how it creates a HDR in the system. So you definitely want to tick that. De-ghosting, again, this would be more important when you are working with moving images. So effectively, de-ghosting would it would try to block out any movement within the scene, because I'm working in stationery, there's absolutely no need for me to click any deghosting amount. So once I've done that, I'm going to press merge, and then I'm going to resume and repeat that process all 8 times. So I'm just going to do that now. HDR isn't a process that I would use within my normally within my artistic practice. It's always been something I would say that I wouldn't say I disagree with it. However, there is an element to HDR which I would consider to be quite artificial in terms of the feel of the image that it creates. Within architectural photography, I don't feel this is a problem at all, and I really like the sort of the contrasty, punchy feel that it gives. Definitely been an interesting skill and sort of thing to think about HDR, and I've noticed, especially when I'm changing contrast and I'm really working with exposure in post-production, it does make a big difference to have higher tonal ranges in which to work with. So it's not taking too long, which is good. I find HDR is really interesting because when you actually look at the 3 original images that you're working with, you don't notice the difference that much, but the effect it has when it goes through the system is really striking. I feel it really sort of, it reduces unnecessary shadows, and it does bring out the highlights in an effective way. And for me, that I like that feel, especially when I'm working in a commercial context. I don't want shadows to be too much of a distraction, and also I want my highlights to be emphasized and protected as much as possible. Brilliant. So I have merged all images together, and what it's effectively done is each time it's created a new separate image, which is the merged image. So just as a point of comparison, so like I was saying, you don't notice the difference too much. So it goes slight tweak, and then boom. It really is powerful. I want to take each image. So I've got this one, and the way you'll be able to tell effectively is there's a little plus and minus, and also if you scroll on it, it will say HDR. So I want to select each one, and I should have 8 images to work with. So 8 selected, lovely. So now I'm actually going to go and create the image stitch. So when I first started out this process, I tried both using Lightroom and Photoshop. I concluded that Lightroom is a far superior and better photo merge process to use, which was something I was obviously very surprised about, because most of the time when I'm working, Photoshop is, I find, far superior, but for some reason, in terms of image stitching, Lightroom is a lot better. So I want to go to Photo Merge, and I want to create a panorama. So there's 2 options. There's HDR panorama, and there's panorama. Because I've already made the HDR images, there's no need for me to select HDR panorama. It wouldn't make any difference. Again, like the HDR process, it's going to create a preview, and then there's some quite important settings here which I will talk through. Effectively, this is an algorithm which runs through the system, so it works with the images, and it sort of, as you can see, it warps them, and it works to find out patterns and repetitions within all the images. So I'm just going to put this up just to make it a little bit easier to see. So here you can see you've got three projections in which to work with. So I'm always going to want to work with perspective. What that will do is that is going to give an image which is truest to life, and will look most natural in terms of the perspective. Spherical, it warps the image too much, and it's not a feel or experience that I would want. I want something which is very exact, which is very regimented. This creates a more expressive and a more subjective representation, which is not what I want. Again, cylindrical. Again, very similar. It squashes the image way too much. So I want to go for perspective. This, of course, will crop the image more. However, it's going to save me a lot of time, and it's going to, in terms of post-production, and it's going to mean that the image isn't warped particularly in any way, which is what I'm looking for. So once I've done this, there's an option to auto crop. However, I would tend to untick that, because it's something which cropping something which I'm going to take care with anyway when I post product, and by disabling auto crop, it's just going to give me more control. So then I want to click merge. This could take a little while. So here we go. So I've got my final image here. So in terms of, you can see there's a few lines which are a bit unstraight. I'm not going to worry too much about that at this stage in Lightroom. The rest, that stage can be perfected and mastered in Photoshop. Here I just want to take care of initial exposure and color corrections. So effectively, this process should not take too long, and is just a case of making initial fine tunes and adjustments before more detailed and advanced editing takes place in the next stage. So you can see here you've got temperature and tint. So I want to save myself as much time as possible when I'm in Photoshop. So I'm going to try and take care of my color correction and balances as much as I possibly can in Lightroom. So I'm just going to keep sort of toggling up and down till I feel I've got an image sort of that's appropriate. So that would be far too cold. That would be too warm. Whereas I feel as a starting point that's fine. Interesting. I'm just gonna, this little toggle here means you can automatically check your white balance. Personally, when I'm color correcting, I don't like to use this because I wanna have much control as possible. So I want to use the process through my eyes. However, I'm just gonna see. You have to pick a neutral, so you have to pick a white or a grey, which could be quite a challenge. Here we go. So you want to select something which is obviously even and quite even in terms of RGB. So that's about a good grey. So let's just see if I could get anything. See if this one takes it. There we go. No. Yeah, I would say. There we go. That's a grey area. So I want to select that, and it's probably, I'd say it's slightly warmer. But I just want to take it as fraction, make it a fraction cooler. And again, tint, and so this is obviously green and magenta. I just want to have a little play with that. Personally, I feel this image would benefit from having more magenta opposed to green. So I'm going to slightly emphasize that in here. I mentioned keeping my highlights is very important. So normally I want to have this highlights at the minus as much as I can. But at the same time, I don't want to go over the top. So as you can see here, first of all, I just want to select. Okay, so this histogram allows me to check points of dark, which is emphasized through the blue, and points of light, which is emphasized through the red. So I'm going to disable the dark one for now because I just want to concentrate on the white. So as I go through my highlights, I want to just, that would be too much. That kills the atmosphere too much. That would be, I would say, about perfect. Again, shadows. I want to have an image which is really sharp and punchy, but at the same time, I'm not just gonna kill the shadows completely because I don't want to kill the mood. So I'm gonna be quite. I feel this image, it needs the feel and the atmosphere of the image. It does require a certain level of shadows. So I'm gonna go at about, I'd say, 60 is good. I'm gonna go for 60. And again, and then I could be careful when I see white, because that will indicate to me that I basically I don't want any red, because that's pure white and that's pure black. Well, emphasized with the blue would be pure black, and I don't want that. Would basically that's overexposure, which I want to avoid. So I want to get as much white as possible. I want as much sort of lightness and darkness contrast, which looks appropriate, as much as I can. Again, it works in a very similar capacity to shadows and highlights. I want to slightly emphasize that, and I feel for this image, I don't want too many blacks. So I'm gonna stop there. Okay. So I don't want to touch any of these at all. Text is just going to create horrible effects, not nice. Again, clarity. No, I think what clarity does, I'm not 100% sure. All it does really is just sort of add layers of contrast, and it completely desaturates the image, and it looks not nice. So we're going to want to avoid that as much as we can. Again, dehaze. Don't want to touch that. I'm gonna tone curve. I'm gonna leave this one for now because I'm gonna work on that more thoroughly in Photoshop. I'm just gonna create a few really minor color corrections, just to again save me that process in Photoshop, because it works just as well in Lightroom. So I want to emphasize, and this changing color would be more subjective. So I'm just looking for key points within the image, key color, tone, and tonal ranges which I feel would benefit from tweaks. So reds, want to keep that as natural as I can. Oranges, want to emphasize my oranges. It creates a nice effect. Yeah, I want to give a little bit more to my greens. For me, blue's obviously quite a prominent color in this image. I want to give it enough, but I really don't want to. I don't want to oversaturate this with blue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a fraction of saturation, and then I'm actually going to give a fraction of luminance as well, just to take the edge off slightly. So here we go. Cool. I'm fine with that. Again, yellow. Personally, because I want to keep a warmish feel to the image, I'm not going to do too much to yellows. So I'm going to keep the saturation as it is, and then I'm going to fractionally adjust the luminance. Cool. That works really nicely, I think. So overall, I'm just going to change the hues as well, just to see. Again, in keeping with that more warmish feel, I'm going to tone down the green slightly to a more yellowish hue. The blues I'm going to keep as they are. That's nice. Yellows, I don't really want to touch the yellows because, again, that's gonna any key primary colours I would be really sure to think about before I start changing hues and anything. One more little section. I'm going to do far more advanced editing in Photoshop in terms of my lines and alignment. However, there's one particular tool which I felt was quite useful, which is the vertical tool. So that will transform your plane. So in this image, it's not too bad. So I'm just going to make a slight change. Just using my eyes and the grids, and I'm looking for vertical lines, and I want them as straight as possible. The aim in this is it's a start really. I'm gonna look in much more detail in Photoshop, but it just saves me a bit of work later on. So I'm quite happy with that. It's looking nice. The image is looking color balance is quite appropriate, and it's nice in terms of the feel. So I'm now going to go ahead and effectively open this in Photoshop.